here is the opposite, where they're starting off referencing an unknown quantity. They say, some beads on the bracelet are blue, there are 4 purple beads, there's 7 beads altogether, how many beads are blue? I think this would be interesting because this is something that, you know, will be, I think it could be challenging for a lot of kids
Yes.
to have to make sense of it. It's a much more complex problem type than just a typical, you know, joining things together.
So, will the lesson have a predictable format that the students are familiar with?
What do you mean by predictable format, I guess?
Will it be delivered with focused lesson followed by workshop? They understand?
Not a workshop day. So this, as written, which obviously it can be adapted, as written, this is like 20 minutes where you're starting off, yeah, a whole group talking about these kinds of problems and, you know, doing some modeling about what that looks like, modeling it with cubes and then matching, you know, written notation to that. Then there's 20 minutes where I would say they're working, working with partners or on their own on those kinds of problems. And then 20 minutes at the end where there's a discussion. It's a pretty good general format for a math lesson, I would say. You know, like you're introducing something, talking about it, they're working, and then you come back together to have a discussion to kind of push the thinking.
Is there any way to, you know, look at the SOL or the POS to know, you know what I'm saying, what part for our children in Fairfax County? I mean, I know this is part of math investigations, but
right.
What's the outcome? They have to know this, or, you know, are we just introducing it and it's okay if they don't get it? I guess I'm just curious.
Like, what's the expectation?
Standard? Yeah.
Like, how can we get
What's the intended learning outcome?
Yeah.
Right.
Because I can tell you, this was very hard for a lot of kids, and I'm particularly concerned about ESOL kids. Because, you know, it's the story problems, and, you know, so
there's language.
There's a lot of language.
A lot of language, it's an issue. And it's a more complex.
Yeah, it's perfect for lesson study because it's complex.
More complex.
And we can think very explicitly about, like, so we know we've got a big ESOL population,
right.
So what are the scaffolds we need to insert to help students that are ESOL students?
Okay.
But yeah, we can absolutely look at the SOLs. I can't recall off the top of my head if they're very explicit about problem types in the SOLs. So like in the Common Core math standards, they explicitly talk about the different problem types. I mean, they talk about all these CGI problem types, 11 different types of problems that you can solve with addition and subtraction. They explicitly name those. I'm not quite sure that the SOLs are really that explicit. I think it's pretty general, like solve and create story problems, and they don't talk about all different kinds necessarily.
So the intended learning outcome, the academic focus, will be the solution of story problems? Problem solving involved with story problems?
That they can solve, I mean, whatever you want to classify this as. So they talk about these as missing part problems. CGI would talk about them as part whole problems with the part unknown.
Right. It's the unknown part, I think that's really key, the missing part.
Yeah. So, you know, like
what tools can you bring to bear when you are confronted with this situation?
Well, this should prove interesting in terms of who's doing the talking and when. And do we have a balance of student-teacher talk in a complex lesson?
Yeah, and it's a difficult lesson. I mean, like, why pick an easy lesson to do lesson study? I don't know how engaging for lesson study just watching kids playing, you know, at the end of this, all these different combinations of 10 games would be. And I mean, what's the worst that happens? So let's say nobody in the class is successful on any of the problems. Well, we learned that, you know, we need to revise this lesson because it still wasn't enough for enough of our kids to be successful. I mean, I don't think it's reasonable to think that in one lesson, all kids are going to master this.
Right, and that's just the introduction, the first part, or the lesson study,
I don't think any of us were advocating the idea of using something that would be easy on us as instructors to push across to students in terms of their learning. I think that at least in because I looked at the data collection instrument, I'm thinking, will we in fact see that balance of student or because we are looking at the needs of the ESOL student, are we thinking that we have to template the language for problem solving and provide more teacher scaffolds for the student? And the research that I've been reading is that you increase the scaffolding, but you don't dumb down or water down the material. And so
Right.
this may be a prime example for us to use because it is complex and we do have an opportunity to keep the content at a high level, high climate of expectations on content level, but then seeing where we have to come in with greater scaffolding or differentiate for some students who may not be able to obtain the learning using the language, the teacher language that we are most used to using.
No, I mean, I just wanna, I agree, I think this is difficult content, and there's no way that going into it that I would expect all of the kids would be able to successfully solve these problems independently after one lesson. I don't think that's reasonable.
So what,
Well, we're down to just a couple of minutes, right, before you have to go.
45, yes, we have time.
Okay, 5 minutes. In terms of getting ready for the 19th, you've seen what the lesson plan frame is. Could you make a photocopy of the lesson and mark it up so that you have it marked teacher action, intended student action, and then, as Lindsay has said, the complexity of this is difficulty students might have in that step.
So who's gonna do that? Is everybody gonna do it on their own?
No, I'm just saying, before we meet on the 19th, it would make the 19th run more smoothly if we looked at the lesson vis-a-vis
So that we
these
can-
steps, so we
okay.
could have the conversation and break it up. And then be anticipating, what do you have in your instructional strategies bag of tricks, if you wanna call it? What will you do if the difficulties are observed? Lindsay brings to us the content knowledge that she can take a look at that and perhaps, because you said you couldn't be here on the 19th, is that correct? Might you take this lesson plan frame in advance of us and make some notes, and sidebar kind of notes where you see this might be a step where there is difficulty?
Yeah, I have that page, what page are you looking at right now?
It's white, it says research on the
It
front.
says examples of research focuses, BLM 29, followed by BLM 21 and 22.
I mean, I don't think I'll have a whole detailed one as,
No,
but,
if you would just, in the margin of the investigations pages, put a star or an arrow or some coding to us that this is where you would anticipate a difficulty occurring. And if you have some suggestions for us as terms of instructional strategies, if you would make a comment there, then we'll take your ideas, incorporate them with ours, and we'll be the ones to break this lesson down. Last year, we did not use this model. We stuck with either the investigations or the being a writer model, but we broke it up so that we had it spaced out. Teacher action, student response, teacher action, student response. And we did have, sort of like in parentheses, if you encounter a problem here, this is what we would
could
suggest.
try or-
You could
Right.
try. So it looked very much like this, but it basically had a sidebar to it that was interpretive in terms of a script for us to follow, because any one of us could have our names drawn to be the teacher for this lesson.
is my name in that too?
No.
Oh, I get off the hook, alright.
Yeah.
She's our content specialist.
So I'll copy
Throw
it
me in it.
for everyone.
Okay. And then if each of you could do something similar to what Lindsay is doing, it'll just make the process go that much faster on the
You
next.
just need a copy of that lesson.
Yeah. I'm gonna, I will copy Cause all of this is
Um,
unit 6.
Okay. Any questions for today? We're gonna stop now because the time is up.